umaga po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to the press conference of the Philippine Statistics Authority para sa 2022 first quarter performance of the Philippine economy ngayong ika-12 ng Mayo, taong 2022. Ako po si Anjay Cardo, ang inyong host para sa press briefing na ito. Ang press conference na ito ay naka-live stream sa PSA Facebook page at ang mga updates naman ay tweeted sa PSA Twitter gamit ang hashtag PHGDP. Ikinararangal ko pong ipakilala ang ating mga resource persons para sa press conference na ito. Si Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kenrick T. Chua ng National Economic and Development Authority at si Philippine Statistics Authority Undersecretary Dennis S. Mapa, National Statistician and Civil Registrar General. Nais din po naming kilalanin ang presensya ng iba pang mga opisyal ng NEDA at PSA na kasama po natin ngayon. From NEDA, kasama po natin si Undersecretary Mercedita Sombilia, Assistant Secretary Carlos Bernardo Abad Santos, Director Nerissa Esguera, Director Louie Limkin, Assistant Director Aldwin Urbina, at Assistant Director Frances Cabana. From PSA, kasama po natin ngayon ang Deputy National Statistician ng PhilSys Registry Office, si ASEC Rosalinda P. Bautista, at kasama rin po natin si Assistant National Statistician, Ms. Vivian Ilarina. Ngayon, atin pong pakinggan ang ulat ni Undersecretary Mapa.
Magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Ang Philippine Statistics Authority ay malugod na mag-uulat ng estado ng ekonomiya ng bansa sa unang quarter ng taong 2022. Ang gross domestic product ng Pilipinas ay nagtala ng pagtaas ng 8.3% sa unang quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay mula sa naitalang pagbaba ng negative 3.8% sa parehong quarter noong nakalipas na taon. Ang net primary income o NPI from the rest of the world ay tumaas din ng 103.2%. Gayun din, ang gross national income o GNI ay nagtala ng pagtaas ng 10.7% sa unang quarter ng taong 2022. Sa seasonally adjusted national accounts, ang unang quarter ng taong 2022, ang GDP ay nagtala ng pagtaas ng 1.9% quarter on quarter. Sa kabilang dako, ang gross national income ay nagtala ng 0.8% quarter on quarter na paglago sa parehong period. Ang mga pangunahing sektor ng ekonomiya na agriculture, forestry and fishing, industry at services ay nagsipagtala ng pagtaas na 0.2%, 10.4% at 8.6% respectively. Sa seasonally adjusted basis naman, ang industry sector ay lumago ng 2.0% habang ang services sector naman ay nagtala ng 2.2% na pagtaas sa quarter-on-quarter na basihan sa unang quarter ng taong 2022. Samantala, ang agriculture, forestry and fishing ay nagtala ng pagbaba ng negative 0.7% sa quarter-on-quarter na basihan. Sa unang quarter ng taong 2022, ang per capita gross domestic product ay tumaas ng 6.9% mula sa naitalang pagbaba ng negative 5.1% sa parehong quarter nitong nakalipas na taon. Ang per capita GNI at per capita household final consumption expenditure ay parehong nakapagtala ng pagtaas na mayroong 9.3% at 8.7% respectively. Sa naitalang pagtaas ng gross domestic product na 8.3% sa unang quarter ng taong 2022, ang services sector ay nagtala ng pinakamataas na kontribusyon na may 5.1 percentage points. Ito ay sinundan ng industry sector na nagtala ng contribution na 3.1 percentage points, habang ang agriculture, forestry and fishing ay nakapag-ambag ng 0.02 percentage points sa kabuuang pagtaas ng gross domestic product. Sa 16 na sektor ng GDP, ang transportation and storage ang nagtala ng may pinakamataas na paglago na mayroong 26.5% sa unang quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay sinundan ng mga sumusunod. Other services na tumaas ng 22.3%. Accommodation and food service activities na tumaas ng 21.0% at mining and quarrying na tumaas ng 17.0%. Ang mga sektor na may malalaking contribution sa pagtaas ng gross domestic product ay ang mga sumusunod. Manufacturing na nag-ambag ng 2.1 percentage points. Wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles na nag-ambag ng 1.2 percentage points at transportation and storage na nag-ambag ng 0.84 percentage point. Sa demand side, ang imports of services ay mayroong pinakamataas na paglago na naitala sa 32.0% sa unang quarter ng taong 2022. Ito ay sinundan ng mga sumusunod. Exports of services na tumaas ng 16.2%, construction na tumaas ng 13.2%, at imports of goods na tumaas ng 12.6%. Sa unang quarter ng taong 2022, ang mga sektor na may malalaking kontribusyon sa pagtaas ng gross domestic product sa expenditure side ay ang mga sumusunod. Household final consumption expenditure na nag-ambag ng 7.5 percentage points. Construction nag-ambag ng 1.5 percentage points. At durable equipment na nag-ambag ng 0.7 percentage point. Ang Philippine Statistics Authority ay malugod na nagpapasalamat sa inyong pagdalo sa National Accounts Press Conference para sa unang quarter ng taong 2022. Inaasahan namin ang ating muling pagkikita sa ika-9 ng Agosto 2022 para sa pag-uulat ng estado ng ekonomiya ng bansa sa ikalawang quarter ng taong 2022. Salamat at magandang umaga sa ating lahat.
Maraming salamat po, Yusek Mapa, para sa ulat ng 2022 first quarter performance of the Philippine economy. Ngayon, atin naman pong pakinggan si Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick T. Chua ng National Economic and Development Authority para sa pahayag ng NEDA ukol sa 2022 first quarter performance of the Philippine economy.
Colleagues in government, can you hear me? Colleagues in government, friends from the media, fellow Filipinos, good morning. We have overcome our country's greatest economic and health challenges. The headwinds we faced were strong, but our quick rebound from the Omicron surge in January proved that we can live and deal with the virus. With our strengthened healthcare capacity and accelerated vaccination program, we were able to contain the surge and safely reopen the economy. On February 1, we shifted our economic centers to Alert Level 2. By the end of March, around 70% of the economy was placed in Alert Level 1. This quick turnaround in the first quarter shows that we can win both the economic and health battles. Having adeptly managed the risk posed by COVID-19, the Philippine economy grew by 8.3% year-on-year in the first quarter of 2022. This is a significant reversal from the 3.8% contraction in the same period last year. We have surpassed the pre-pandemic gross domestic product level. Growth in the first quarter exceeded the median analyst forecast of 6.7%, making the Philippines the fastest growing economy in the East Asia region for the period. On a seasonally adjusted quarter-on-quarter basis, the economy grew by 1.9% compared to the fourth quarter of 2021. Other economic indicators support this strong recovery. Google mobility data improved further when we lowered the alert levels. Visits to the transit stations are now 30% higher than the pre-pandemic level. That is the black line that you see compared to the red, which is 2020, and blue, which is 2021 for the same month, while visits to the workplaces have also exceeded the pre-pandemic level by around 20%. The unemployment rate in March 2022 fell to 5.8%, the lowest since the start of the pandemic. Employment creation is now at 4.4 million, above the pre-pandemic level. We have restored many jobs and livelihood by shifting to a more endemic mindset, accelerating vaccination, and implementing granular lockdowns that only targeted the areas of highest risk while allowing the majority of our people to work and earn a living. Other positive developments include manufacturing, which saw a volume of production index growth of 366% in March of 2022. External trade with a growth rate of 18.6% in March of 2022, and remittances, which hit 2.8 billion US dollars in February of 2022. All of these attest to the sustained gains from the government's proactive response to recover fully from the pandemic. Growth in the first quarter of 2022 was broad-based as most sectors rebounded from their contractions in the same period last year. On the production side, all sectors expanded, driven by industry and services at 10.4% and 8.6% respectively. Meanwhile, agriculture slightly improved by 0.2% as growth was hindered by the African swine fever and elevated prices of agricultural commodities such as corn, pork, and sugar. On the expenditure side, growth was driven by private consumption, which went up by 10.1%, a stark reversal from the minus 4.8% figure in the same period last year. With much relaxed quarantine restrictions and more vaccinated Filipinos, family activities, leisure, travel, and tourism have all grown significantly. Other expenditure items such as investment and external trade also expanded. Investments recorded a robust growth of 20% from minus 13.9% in 2021. Exports expanded by 10.3% and imports grew by 15.6%. In contrast, growth in government expenditure temporarily slowed down to 3.6% from 16.1% last year, as public construction contracted by 4.9%, as the election spending ban began towards the end of the first quarter. We expect both of these to accelerate in the second half of this year. Our strong economic performance moves us closer to achieving our growth target of 7 to 9% this year, but we will not rest on our laurels. We will continuously work hard to strengthen our domestic economy against heightened external risks such as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, China's slowdown, and monetary normalization in the United States. To sustain our growth momentum, President Duterte issued Executive Order number 166 to implement the Economic Development Cluster's 10-point policy agenda for a strong recovery. We have made meaningful progress in most indicators. We can clearly see how hard-hit sectors like tourism and leisure have recovered from a sharp drop in demand. A significant piece missing in our recovery is the resumption of face-to-face schooling. More than the foregone economic activity due to school closures, we are very much concerned about the learning loss and impact on future productivity of our children. Under Alert Level 1, children are allowed to engage in leisure and recreational activities in all indoor and outdoor venues. But the most important activity of children, studying, continues to be restricted. Hence, we reiterate our call for the urgent resumption of face-to-face schooling, plus a catch-up plan to regain lost learning in the past 2 years. This will help secure better opportunities for future generations and ensure that our demographic dividends will not be wasted. Managing inflation also remains one of our top priorities. The economic team has recommended the extensions of Executive Orders 134 and 135 to expand our supply of pork and rice. The EDC also recommended a temporary reduction of the most favored nation tariff rate for corn, a primary ingredient in animal feeds. All of these will help ease inflationary pressures and stabilize food prices. We continue to implement various targeted subsidy programs for the public transport and agriculture sector to cushion the impact of rising oil prices. As of 30 April 2022, around 180,000 public utility vehicle drivers and operators have received their 6,500 peso fuel subsidy. The Department of Energy also continues its effort to secure 1 to 4 peso per liter discounts from private oil companies for the public transport sector. Likewise, the Department of Agriculture is implementing a fuel subsidy program for 159,000 farmers and fisherfolk. We stand ready to support our people should volatility continue. When the Duterte administration took office in 2016, it set an ambitious target of lifting 6 million Filipinos out of poverty and becoming an upper middle income country by 2022. Guided by the bold 0 to 10 point socio-economic agenda, we fought hard to enact game-changing reforms that were decades in the making. So this chart gives you an idea of the progress. All the green ones are accomplished. Even as the world was hit hard by the pandemic, our resolve to pursue reforms did not waver and even bolstered our economy's prospects. The pandemic may have pushed back our timetable, but not our targets and resolve. The bold policy reforms we instituted over the past 6 years will drive our economy forward with vigor. We have set the sails for the next administration to achieve rapid and more inclusive growth in 2022 and beyond. The Philippine economy is a strong and steady ship, ready for whatever storms that might lie ahead. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Secretary Chua. Bago po natin simulan ang open forum, nais po naming paunlakan at pasalamatan ang lahat ng press at media partners na kasama sa press briefing na ito. Para po sa maayos na pagsasagawa ng ating open forum, ay narito po ang ilang mga paalala. Para sa mga online participants, ang inyong mga press kits ay amin pong ipapadala via email. Maaari po ninyong gamitin ang raise hand feature ng Zoom kung nais po ninyong direktang magtanong sa ating mga resource persons. Kapag kayo po ay natawag upang magtanong, pakisabi po ang inyong pangalan at ang organisasyong inyong kinabibilangan bago po ang inyong tanong. Maaari rin po kayong magpadala ng tanong gamit ang chat box. Siguraduhin lamang po na nakalagay ang inyong pangalan at organization. Panatilihin pong nakamute ang inyong mga mic kung kayo po ay hindi pa natatawag upang magtanong. Para naman po sa mga on-site participants, pakitaas lamang po ang inyong kamay kung kayo po ay may katanungan at hintayin lamang po na kayo ay ma-acknowledge upang magtanong. Kapag kayo po ay natawag, pakisabi po ang inyong pangalan at organization bago po ang inyong question. Finally, ang printout po ng inyong press kits ay ibibigay po sa inyo ng PSA staff. Alright, maraming salamat po. Ngayon, handa na po tayo sa ating open forum. We have questions from the Zoom chat box. The first question is from Mr. Ted Cordero of GMA News. This is addressed to USEC MAPA. In nominal terms, have we exceeded pre-pandemic levels in Q1 2022?
Thank you very much for the question. For the numbers at current prices, our Q1 2022 is 4.9 trillion already GDP, and this is higher than the 2019 Q1 of 4.43 trillion, or even the 2020 Q1 of 4.45 trillion. For the real GDP, Q1 2022 is about 4.618 trillion, and this is higher compared to the 2019 Q1 real GDP of 4.46 trillion, higher by about 3.5%. So both current and constant prices we have already exceeded the pre-pandemic Q1 level. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Yusek Mapa. Ang susunod na tanong ay galing kay Ms. Pilar Patrice Manuel of CNN Philippines. This is addressed to Secretary Chua. Does the economic team see a need to upgrade the 7 to 9% growth target band given the strong growth in Q1 2022?
Well, as of now, we will be recommending to the DBCC to keep the 7 to 9% target. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Secretary Chua. Our next question is from Ms. Eileen Mencias of Abante. Again, this is addressed to Secretary Chua. How do you see the rise in commodity prices in the world market impacting on the growth of the economy? She also has a follow-up question. Paano ito mararamdaman ng karaniwang mamamayan at ano ang kailangan gawin ng susunod na administrasyon para maibsan ang epekto nito?
Well, the inflation that we are seeing now are all imported, driven by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So we are seeing oil prices going up above $100 per barrel. Gas and diesel are around 75 peso per liter. We are also seeing food prices going up, particularly corn, for instance. So we have to address them by ensuring adequate food supply. So in the domestic economy, we are pursuing the improvement of productivity of farmers. So we have the rice tariffication law. Interestingly, because of that, we have kept inflation of rice at very low levels. Even when the typhoons in the fourth quarter and the first quarter have affected our rice supply. So rice pali production was negative. However, inflation was below 2%. That is because we are able to temporarily import for the needs of the people. We are working with the Senate and the Congress to pass the Livestock Competitiveness and Development Bill, which will address our issues in meat, dairy, poultry. So these are the things that we are doing. We are also proposing the extension of the EOs so that we can temporarily import to keep supply stable and prices manageable. We are also helping, as I mentioned, farmers, fisherfolk, public utility operators, and drivers through the various targeted subsidies. All of these, I believe, are important to make sure that we manage inflation and help the people affected by the higher prices of fuel and food. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Secretary Chua. Our next question was also sent via the Zoom chat box by Mr. Ted Cordero of GMA News. This is addressed to Secretary Chua. What's in the Duterte administration's transition plan to ensure the gains in the first quarter and maybe the second quarter will be continued by the next administration?
Well, in general terms, there are two things that I think are most important. The first is to ensure a strong macro fiscal foundation. That is really the basic. That will ensure that the house of the Philippines, or the ship called the Philippines, will remain strong, so that we have resources to help the people address other concerns. So that is the first, to maintain our responsible and prudent fiscal policy. The second is policy continuity. The Duterte administration has enacted very many reforms as presented in the 0 to 10-point socioeconomic agenda, such as the comprehensive tax reform, the rice tariffication, the Build, the national ID, the universal healthcare, ease of doing business, the 3 liberalization bills that open the economy to more foreign competition. All of them, I believe, should be retained, not reversed. Policy continuity is the most important, I think, during this transition. And we stand ready to have a dialogue with the transition team of the new administration to discuss the details. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Secretary Chua. The next question is from Mr. Warren de Guzman of ABS-CBN. He sent his question via Zoom chat box. This is for Secretary Chua. Investors and analysts have noted that there are investor concerns regarding the incoming administration's policies, specifically uncertainty surrounding economic plans, and how the major private sector business families might be treated based on their past positions or alignments on issues around the earlier Marcos regime. How do you view these concerns?
Well, okay, any change, of course, will create concerns, whether it is at the national level, at your personal level, for instance, if you change a job, or at the family or community level. So I think the best way to address some of these concerns is, as the investors and other analysts have mentioned, is for the new administration to lay out its agenda so that people will understand better and alleviate any or possible concerns that are currently being expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. May we ask if there are any questions from our reporters present on site? Sir?
Hi, good morning, sir. This is Ben De Vera of Inquirer. Sir, you mentioned policy continuity. Has there been any offer by the incoming Marcos administration to you to stay in NEDA? And
Oh.
if ever offered to stay on, will you stay on? And
You're asking me
yes.
about, I haven't received any offer. And
But
there's
if
a
ever-
time for everything.
But if ever they'll offer you, would you be willing to stay, perhaps?
I think there's a time for everything, and my time is called to somewhere else. Thank
Alright.
you.
Sir, another question would be: are we on track to become an upper middle income country this year?
Well, okay, let me explain this in detail. No? There are several factors that are unfolding right now. The first one is, while we are strong on the domestic demand or domestic economy side, the computation of upper middle income is based on gross national income, which also includes our remittances from what do you call it?
Net primary income.
Net primary income. Okay. That has fallen significantly in the past 2 years because there are close to 1 million OFWs that were repatriated back. So they're not earning. That impacts our net primary income. So we have seen that the net primary income growth this quarter has grown by 100%,
103%.
103%. If that is sustained, meaning our OFWs, while we want them to stay and give them opportunity here, if they find opportunities abroad, that will help our GNI. So we will continuously monitor that. The second is what the World Bank will use as the new threshold, which they announce usually around middle of this year. And of course, the exchange rate matters because everything is converted to US dollar equivalent. So I think we might not see it this year, given the developments, but I'm hoping that we can see that transition in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Chua. Our next question is from Mr. Ralph Rivas of Rappler.
Hi, sir. Good morning. My questions are for Secretary Carl Chua. First is on low interest rates. Actually, the real interest rates are in the negative. Do you think that this helped in Q1 GDP growth for this year?
The real interest rates?
Interest rates are in
sorry,
the
where are you?
real negative interest rates.
There.
Okay. Hi, sir.
Okay, yes. I have to reframe my vision from Zoom to actual. Sorry. The Q1 GDP is largely driven by the change in our policy to fully open the economy. I understand more than 70% of the economy are in alert level 1. And we are doing very well in all aspects of the 10-point policy agenda for accelerating economic recovery, except the resumption of face-to-face schooling. So this is the main driver of the growth. Despite the risks from outside the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the rising commodity prices, the US monetary normalization, China's slowdown, those are affecting our economy. But because we have pursued the full opening of the economy and made sure that our domestic economy is much stronger. That is really driving it. Of course, we will have to continuously monitor the dynamics of exchange rates and the interest rate gap between our country and the US, for instance, so that we can address any concerns rising from any possible imbalance. Thank you.
And then my second question, sir, is on the transition details. Any particular details that you can share, like what did they ask? Ano yung sinabi or ni-recommend ninyo to the transition team of Mr. Marcos?
Well, personally, they have not talked to me. I understand they talked to DOF. Secretary Dominguez is head of the economic team. But as I mentioned, I think we are firm on several messages. The first is to maintain our macro fiscal prudence. The second is our policy continuity, especially all the reforms that were passed under the Duterte administration. Within NEDA, our priorities that we have been saying, and I will repeat them again, are the following. Number one, in the immediate term, is addressing the full economic recovery, including the opening of all face-to-face classes. And the second is addressing inflation, as I have addressed, or as I have mentioned a while ago. Then we begin to think of the medium term. There are 4 priorities that NEDA is proposing to prioritize. The first is how to pursue smarter infrastructure. The second is to improve the regional equity of how we allocate budget and resources. Number 3 is to pursue the innovation agenda, and that is really what will make the country grow to become high income. And number 4, and most importantly, to address climate change. So these are the issues that I think are important that we are, as NEDA, recommending to the next administration as the medium-term objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. We have another live question from Ms. Kai Ordinario from Business Mirror.
Hi, sir. Good morning po. Sir, I just want to ask, how sustainable is the 8.3? How much of that was election spending? How much of that was base effects? And then third, have we already exhausted the limits of economic policy in terms of addressing the possible impact of the Russia-Ukraine war? Have we already done everything in terms of policy to cushion the impact? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, which part is election spending and which part is others? We have to do the analysis because we also got the data a few hours, the detailed data a few hours earlier. But I think that the big driver of this growth is our full reopening of the economy. I think that is the single most important driver. In the past, the impact of election spending that I have seen in my previous studies do not exceed 1 percentage points. So you can imagine that the big bulk is really from the opening of the economy. Now, we are a strong economy thanks to successive administrations, macro fiscal prudence. That is really the insurance we bring into this very difficult time of COVID, then the Russia-Ukraine conflict, China's slowdown, and monetary normalization. I think we have exhausted it in this sense. Number one, we have not wasted the time in the last 6 years to continuously make the economy stronger. That is really the basic. Number two, we have put in place several reforms that even furthered the potential of the economy. Even during the pandemic, we passed the CREATE law and 3 liberalization bills, which many felt were not possible because in a crisis, sometimes your attention is on other things. But we were able to focus and pass all these. All of these will increase the potential of our economy. So I believe we have exhausted to a lot of extent. Of course, we can do even more. We have to address now the remaining issues, especially in agriculture. And the most important bill pending in Congress is the Livestock Development and Competitiveness Bill, which will address our two-year problem with high pork prices. We also have to, of course, look at the future productivity of our children by resuming face-to-face classes and having a solid catch-up plan. Now, should the uh, crisis or conflict be prolonged, then we will have to, of course, recalibrate our policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. We have another live question from Mr. Ben De Vera, this time from Philippine Daily Inquirer.
Hi, Secretary Chu. I'll go back to policy continuity because based on the scant information we got, or at least because he was not really giving out
Okay.
interviews, incoming President Marcos has expressed some policy, in scant details, but he like he seems he would like to reverse some of the reforms made by this administration, like rice tarification, and he was willing to give away more doleouts despite the need for fiscal consolidation. Can you just emphasize what would be the dangers in case they won't continue whatever reforms your administration started, and would it impact on growth and poverty alleviation, for example, and the move to upper middle income status in case a lot of the reforms you made are reversed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me tackle rice tarification. The rice tarification law, I think, is the best model that we have to help both farmers and consumers. By removing quantitative restrictions, we are able to address both the needs of consumers for lower retail price of rice and use the funding from the tariff, which I believe is 18 billion peso last year, to fully fund the RCEP, which is the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund. Those calling for the removal, for instance, of the rice tarification law risk taking away 18 billion peso that we are giving to farmers to improve their productivity. There are some who say that we need to lower the price of rice, or some saying that they are promising to lower the price of rice. That is really possible if we help farmers improve productivity. That is exactly what RTL is doing by providing them mechanization, seeds, and other support. At the same time, we have seen that it is helping manage inflation. Prior to 2019, rice was the single most or biggest contributor to inflation. Today, and since 3 years ago, after the passage of RTL, it is zero or negative contribution to inflation. Even during the first quarter of this year, when rice production was negative, meaning nag-contract, inflation of rice was below 2%. It was 1.9. That's because we are able to temporarily import. Importation is a way to address the supply and price volatility. If we did not have that, people would face much higher inflation today. So that is one example. We hope that this and our dialogue with the transition team of the new administration will help them understand better what are the costs and benefits of the policies that we have proposed. And I think for rice, the rice tarification law is the best model that should not be changed. We are doing the same model for livestock, dairy, poultry, and so on. And we hope to do that for other crops as well. Thank you. Yes, go ahead. We have many time.
Sir, so also for ambush interview later, sir? No.
Yes. Okay, we can have a talk later.
All right,
Also.
sir. Thank you. And
A
sir,
chat, no, not ambush, a chat.
all right, that's right. That's good. Thank you, sir. Sir,
I'm
how
not
about
accustomed to ambush.
yeah? How about sir fiscal consolidation? What are your thoughts? What could you recommend to the next administration? And also, sir, uh, the incoming president has expressed giving away more doleouts, but he seems to be rejecting higher taxes. So our debt and our deficits would be in danger. Any thoughts on that, sir?
Well, as I mentioned, the most important in the transition recommendation is to maintain macro fiscal policy prudence. What that means is you live within your means. So on the expenditure side, I think it is important to reevaluate the priorities. And if subsidies are given, to make sure that they are targeted. And by the end of the year, NS Dennis Mapa and ASEC Rose would have achieved 92 million registered in the national ID. That's one of the ways to ensure that subsidies are targeted. So number two, I think, have to continue the infrastructure program. Part of that will be coming from own resources. Of course, part of that will be coming from borrowings. I think the next administration would have to seriously think about the next set of tax reforms to fund the program. But the most important is really to uh, continue this macro fiscal prudence, living within our means, raising tax revenues if needed to fund important investment in infra and human capital development. Uh, so I think that that's really the priority. That has been the policy for four consecutive, no, one, two, three consecutive administrations. And we hope and believe that this is the most important continuity that must be maintained. Thank you.
Thank
Sir,
you, Secretary Chua.
Mhm.
Yes, sir. You may raise your question.
sir, going back to the issue on rice, presumptive President Marcos earlier said that he wants to bring rice prices down to 20 pesos. So do you think that the 20 peso price is possible under rice tarification?
Okay, under rice tarification, the programs are expected to increase the yield per hectare from 4 metric tons to 5 or 6. So that is possible, actually. There are some places in the Philippines that are very competitive and can produce efficiently. But there are some places that they don't have comparative advantage. So the data that we are seeing from DA and PhilRice show that it is possible. Uh, if our support to rice farmers are very targeted and efficient, then I think that is a possibility. However, if our support to them comes in the form of production subsidy that does not tie to outputs, then that might be a problem. So that it depends on how we channel the support. We have to, as I mentioned, balance the need to support our farmers in a targeted and productive manner and address the concerns of the people who need lower food prices. If we are going to use taxpayers' money solely to subsidize without conditions and without any productivity measure uh, the rice production, then that's a bad idea. That is actually what we removed in the rice tarification law. So I hope we will not go back to that old practice, which actually just increased the price of rice, made the farmers poor still, created huge contingent and actual liabilities for the government, stunted the children, and kept minimum wages high because cost of living is high. So I think on the rice and food issue, we have to keep this rice tarification law because, as I mentioned, it is the best model to help both farmers and consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. Okay,
Hi, sir. Shaila Francisco from TV5. Earlier you listed down the priorities that the incoming administration should pursue. I'm just wondering, based on your assessment with the campaign promises of Bongbong Marcos, is there a clear picture of already that this will be continued? I mean, the priorities that you have listed down earlier.
The details are now important. And I think, as many have pointed out, it would be important to know what is the detail of their proposed policy. We have heard in the campaign, of course, many statements. Of course, he would like to prioritize and support the build, the micro, small, and medium enterprises to help the farmers. So these are all objectives that we share. The most important now, I think, is to understand more the policy proposals and the details. And NEDA and the economic team, we stand ready to have a discussion to share with them our experience on what works and what do not work. Thank you.
Sir, my second question, in the remaining weeks of the administration, may mga policies ba that you plan to pursue, or are we now focused on the transition po talaga?
Well, I think there are three important bills that I hope the Congress can still consider in its last 2 or 3 weeks. The first is, as I mentioned, itong Livestock Development and Competitiveness Bill, which will address our problems in pork, uh, poultry, dairy, corn, and beef. That's important because still high in the inflation contribution is meat prices. Number two, number two and three are two remaining tax reform that I think are crucial. Package 3 on property valuation and package 4 on passive income. Best time to pass tax reform is once you are out of the pressure from the elections. So I hope they can be pursued with haste. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. Let's now go over the questions sent via Zoom chat from our online participants. I see several questions on queue already. The first question is from Mr. Tobias Jared Thomas of Business World. This is for Secretary Chua. He has two questions. The first one is, what should be the number one priority of the incoming administration to help sustain economic recovery? His second question is, how would the full resumption of face-to-face classes impact GDP?
Okay, I think, since we are doing relatively well on the economic opening, as evidenced by the Q1 data, the immediate priority is to address inflation, especially those that affect the people the most, food prices. That's why we have to preserve the rice tariffication law and perhaps consider the immediate passage of all the other measures that will help stabilize food prices and increase supply. Like, as I mentioned, yung livestock and poultry competitiveness bill, which is pending in the Senate. The next question that was asked is the impact on face-to-face. Well, in economic terms, the median age of the Philippines, I understand, is 24 years old. That means 40% of the people are studying. And if they're not going to school, then there are so many things that don't operate at normal capacity, like cafeteria, school supplies, public transport, the restaurants nearby, the uniform, and so on. We estimate that every week of school closure costs the economy 12 billion pesos. While there have been opening and pilots, we have not yet seen the impact. So malaki yung impact sa ekonomiya in the short term if we open face-to-face. But our main concern is the future productivity of our children. And NED has estimated that closing schools for 2 years face-to-face costs us more than 22 trillion pesos over the lifetime of the student. So that's really something we have to prioritize also. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. Our next question is from Mr. Warren de Guzman of ABS-CBN News. This is for Secretary Chua. Given the strength in the first quarter, do you think the economy is stable enough for a tightening of domestic monetary policy?
First of all, the inflation that we are experiencing are all supply-driven, not demand-driven. So that means any movement in monetary policy would have to take that fact into account, unlike in other countries where they have demand-driven inflation. We have to understand kasi the source of that inflation. And I think that is exactly what the BSP is looking into right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. The next question is from Ms. Bernadette Reyes of GMA News. This is for Secretary Chua. Could you laymanize how the next administration could achieve improvements in regional equity and pursue innovation agenda?
Okay, basically, we have increased the budget of health, education, infrastructure significantly over the past 6 years. Before, we were spending less than, on average, 300 billion for infra. In the past 4 budget seasons, we have proposed over 1 trillion peso. What we have discovered as we look into this infra budget is that it can be better in terms of equity. So in layman term, it's basically understanding where the needs are, what parts of the country lack energy, water supply, roads or bridges or farm to market roads, using data to objectively assess where you prioritize scarce resources. So that's really what regional equity mean. Okay, innovation. Um, the driver of growth for a low middle income country is production, as we see in ecozones, using ideas coming from advanced countries, which we assemble the products in our ecozone. That model is not going to be the driver of growth as we become richer, as we become upper middle income. So innovation means getting the schools, the government, and the business to start creating the ideas within the Philippines and applying those innovative ideas and solutions and creating those products in the Philippines. And we know that that is very possible because we have so many OFWs working, for instance, in Singapore or the US or the European Union with bright ideas and contributing to their economic dynamism. So we want to bring them back and create those ideas here. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. Our next question is from Mr. Warren de Guzman of ABS-CBN News. This is a follow-up from his earlier question. Just to refresh your memory, Secretary Chua, he asked, given the strength in the first quarter, do you think the economy is stable enough for a tightening of domestic monetary policy? So his follow-up is, where have you been called to? Private sector, multinational, abroad?
Me? Call to? None. None. I've not received any offer. I plan to study and spend time with family.
Okay. Thank you, Secretary. Okay, let me see if we have other questions from our Zoom chat. For our on-site media partner participants, do you have other questions? Okay. Sir, go ahead.
This is 2 years worth of pent-up questions.
Yes, sorry, sir, but
No,
just to
it's
push
okay.
that because I know you're really passionate about helping the country, but you said
Helping the what?
you've been passionate about helping the country.
Yes. In,
So yeah, what if you're offered to continue helping the country,
I can help in any other capacity.
but not with the next administration,
I think there's a time for everything,
which is how soon
which
can
is
we
for
know?
me to help in another capacity
All right, sir. See,
and to give opportunities to other bright people who are willing, able, and available to help inside government.
Pachino Liga sa question.
Okay, next question. Sir, go ahead.
Secretary, good morning. Chino Leco, Manila Bulletin.
I miss you also.
I miss you, sir. Sir, you repeatedly mentioned continuity, but we should also agree that this administration is not perfect. So my question, Secretary, can you give us one thing that this administration missed and the Marcos administration should do first in a post-Duterte government, and why?
There are several that I can think of. Okay. The first is I think we could have pursued more vigorously our tax reforms. We have not achieved all that we promised. There are two important packages that are still pending, and they are so important. You know why? Because package 3 and package 4 are about improving equality. These are wealth taxes. Okay, package 3 is about properties. Package 4 is about passive income. We have done the tax reform on income taxation and consumption taxation. But the bulk of wealth of the very rich are in their assets, in their properties, in their investment. And I think we could have done more. And we will use the remaining session in Congress to push that. Okay, that's number one. The second is, I think, we could do more urgent actions on climate change mitigation and adaptation. Number three, I think we have to start connecting the dots in our reforms in the education sector and where they land jobs. In NEDA, we are going to propose an apprenticeship bill to help in the transition process. Right now, we are producing many graduates, and this year would be the first complete K-12 graduate. The pandemic and the economic condition will make it hard, maybe for many, to get a job. The bridge there, which is important in many other countries to get people to a job, is apprenticeship. We have some restrictions in the labor code, and we wish to address that. It's really about getting our strong demographic dividend to get better jobs and opportunities. I think there are some other bills in the priority legislation, such as the Uniform Personnel Pension, National Land Use Act, that we haven't passed. So those are the things that I think that the next administration could continue, or the last 3 weeks of Congress should prioritize. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. We have another question. Go ahead.
Sir, on build, should the Marcos administration do a plug and play, or continue most, if not all, the programs of the Duterte administration?
Okay.
What are the key considerations to make it financially viable, given the twin deficits, inflation, geopolitical risks, and should they not do so or have modifications in the build program? What are the key considerations in tweaking the infra programs?
Okay. Based on the data that we are seeing, no, by the end of the term, we would have completed 17 of these flagship projects. And there are 77 ongoing, meaning construction, worth 4 trillion pesos, that are beyond shovel ready. So ibig sabihin, the first day of the next administration should just continue the building. And there are 25 projects, I think, that have not been approved, that are in processing. But there are so many already of the requirements ready that the next administration can simply proceed kasi may feasibility study na. In other words, the next administration is going to start with a very solid foundation for infrastructure. They don't need to spend 2 or 3 years doing procurement and feasibility. Ready na yan. So they have to implement it. Where to get the money? Well, that is why a strong macro fiscal foundation is key. You open the economy, create more activities, and that will generate more tax revenues, and that can be used to fund the equity side of infra. Admittedly, all infra are very expensive, and part of that will come from borrowing. But the multiplier and the returns of infra are so high that it is worth the borrowing. Another is we have to maintain our macro fiscal prudence because that keeps credit ratings high, which means we can borrow very cheaply. So those are the things. Yung dynamic na yan is so important to keep our infra spending sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chua. Okay, Mr. Ted Cordero of GMA News has a question sent via Zoom chat regarding the schedule of the NEDA team's meeting with the Marcos transition team to discuss the continuity of economic policies. I believe Secretary Chua already answered this earlier.
Yeah, we're ready anytime they're ready.
Thank you, Secretary. Do we have other questions from our press partners on site and online? Okay. Yes,
Have you
sir, go
been
ahead.
told who would be NEDA secretary under the Marcos
I'm not been told.
Thank you, sir.
Whoever is willing, able, and available would fit well.
Okay. Do we have other questions? Okay, let me just check the Zoom. Okay.
And there's one.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, Sec. Just to follow up po. Para sa inyo yung assessment nyo, what kind of economic team would be best for the incoming administration? Anong mga qualifications para masustain yung growth and masunod yung mga wish list po natin?
Well, apart from willing, able, and available, I think yung pinaka-important is to recognize that the macro fiscal policy has been sustained for 3 administrations, and that is the most important. A team that will continue that. Then on the economic liberalization bills, while it has taken more than 6 administrations to get many of the reforms passed, by the way, by economic liberalization, I'm talking about opening the market to more competition so we can bring down prices, offer better quality of goods and services. That has continuously happened since the time of President Cory Aquino and President Ramos and so on. So mabagal pero hindi tayo nagre-reverse. So that is something that I hope the next transition, the next economic team will prioritize.
Sir, just a follow-up po. In terms of qualifications, would you recommend a career official or it doesn't matter naman po as long as these are
Any who is willing, able, and available.
Okay, thank you, Secretary Chua. Okay, it seems that is the last of our questions. Okay, so nais po naming pasalamatan ang ating mga resource persons, Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick T. Chua ng National Economic and Development Authority at si Undersecretary Dennis S. Mapa, National Statistician and Civil Registrar General ng PSA. Maraming salamat din po sa mga opisyal ng NEDA at PSA na kasama natin ngayon. Gayon din po sa ating mga press at media partners na nakilahok sa press conference na ito ng Philippine Statistics Authority para sa 2022 first quarter performance of the Philippine economy ngayong 12 ng Mayo, taong 2022. Sana po ay patuloy po ninyo kaming suportahan. Maaari po ninyong bisitahin ang aming website sa www.psa.gov.ph for more updates. Muli, ako po si Anja Ricardo mula sa PSA. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat.